Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Watch. I'm not even moving it. Chair is broken, so pre-warning, it might be annoying. Today we're gonna start a series on something that I have been dealing with for about 4 years now, and it's had a lot of negative effects on my life, but it's also had some positive effects because of where I'm at now and what I've kind of learned throughout the process. So the series is going to be called Figuring Out My Hormones, and this is part 1. Today we are going to go through my journey with my acne, all these appointments and health professionals that I've seen. We're going to talk about it all. Be prepared. This has been a really long journey for me. Maybe 4 years doesn't seem like that long, but it has felt like a lifetime of dealing with these things. So I made sure that I wrote down absolutely everything, so I will not miss anything. I figured that I would share it at some point, but I feel like right now is the perfect time. Let's get into it. I don't know why I'm in such a good mood today. Hopefully because I get to do this. So I've shared this on multiple platforms before, small details or small updates, but today I'm going to go through it all. From the beginning to the end. Well, not the end. To the beginning to now, because it's not done yet. So I'm gonna start with saying that I had the absolute best experience with a health professional yesterday, which led me to actually create this video and to have hope, have this new spark in this journey because I was feeling so defeated. But before I talk about what's going on now and what made that appointment so incredible, I'm gonna rewind back to summer of 2019 when I first started to experience painful cystic acne. This was about 6 months after I had stopped oral birth control. I originally got off the pill simply because I moved cities, so I moved from London to Toronto, and I was honestly just too lazy to go and change my pharmacist. I just stopped taking the pill. It was pure laziness, wasn't thinking anything of it. Mind you, that was probably the best year for my emotional health since I probably started my period. Yeah. I moved back home for the summer and I immediately started developing, like, I always had a little bit of acne, maybe some bumps, but I wouldn't even call myself acne prone before. I started developing big, painful cystic acne. It was all over my cheeks and kind of like my jawline area mostly. My self-esteem, my confidence were so low at the time. I just remember constantly crying and just thinking, like, what did I do to make this happen? I was so confused. I didn't even think about the fact that I went off birth control. I didn't think that there was any relation to that. I thought maybe, I came home and, I missed being on my own and I was stressed at home. It was really bad. I felt very depressed and I was isolating myself. I didn't want to go out in public. I just thought I was disgusting at the time. So then I had an appointment with my family doctor to just kind of talk to him, like, what's going on? Like, this is so random out of the blue. And he basically told me that I needed to go back on birth control to help with my acne. So basically using birth control to treat my acne. This time he wanted to do an IUD because it was apparently more effective at the time. And also he wanted to put me on a medication called spirolactone, which is a blood pressure medication and a diuretic, supposed to also have the effects of controlling acne. I believe it's through sebum production. It just reduces it. At the time, I didn't ask any questions. I didn't do any of my own research. I was in first year university. I was so young, I didn't know any better, and I was just like, anything that will clear my skin, I will do. So a couple weeks later, I got the IUD inserted, and that was probably the most traumatic experience ever, physically, and I went on the spirolactone. After a couple months, my acne did start to get better. I wasn't getting as many, like, cystic acne. I wasn't really getting a lot of new acne. Spirolactone did come with a few side effects. I was getting dry lips, dry scalp, obviously dry skin as well. Because it's a diuretic, I was also peeing a lot, which was kind of annoying on road trips. And I was sensitive towards the sunlight, but it wasn't anything too bad. It was pretty minor. Except for the peeing thing, I found like that was pretty annoying because you're supposed to also drink more water, but then you drink more water and you just keep peeing. So I was on that for about a year while I kept my IUD as well. And I thought to myself after a year of being on it, you know, my skin wasn't clear. Like I would still get acne, it just wasn't as bad. And I was thinking, like, how long am I gonna have to be on this medication? You know, is it truly working for me if I'm still getting acne? It wasn't the solution that I wanted. I wanted the acne to be gone, and I wanted to be able to feel confident without makeup again, and I wanted, like, kind of my life back in a way. I know that sounds pretty dramatic, but if you've dealt with this, you will probably understand what I mean by that. You just don't really feel like yourself. Like you want to hide from the world. At the time, I believed the only way to completely get rid of my acne would be to go on Accutane. So I talked to my doctor and he put me on 6 months of Accutane. The side effects were much worse. I basically got all the side effects that I got with spirolactone except for the peeing thing. And just a lot worse. Like my lips were like completely cut open, even though I used so many different like lip balms and like medicated lip ointments. My skin was like flaking, which is normal when you're on Accutane. Like everything is dry. I didn't have much of a sex drive as well because again, everything was dry. I also got like rashes on my arms as well. I was also on Accutane during COVID, so I did deal with a lot of anxiety, a lot of, you know, periods of depression as well. It wasn't an easy time for me, but I can't really say whether that was because I was in a pandemic or if I was on Accutane. Probably both. On the 5th month, my skin was completely clear and I kept going for another month. And my skin was clear for about 6 months. Like my confidence was coming back. Like I felt like I didn't have to wear makeup. You know, even my scarring was going away. It felt like what I had been waiting for. And then after the 6 months, it started to come back more as like small like bumps, more of like a texture. I would get cysts as well, but it like gradually came back. My skin started to get oily again. My hair got really oily. It was like taking the biggest step back ever. It felt awful because of, you know, all those side effects that I dealt with, all of those other things that I had dealt with. Almost felt like it was for nothing. It started to come back mostly on my cheeks. I didn't get a lot of jawline acne when my acne came back, but I got it on my cheeks and I actually started getting it on my back for the first time. When I say for the first time, I mean like a lot on my back. Like maybe I'd get like one pimple or something here and there, but my back knee was really bad. I started to get kind of small bumps on my chest as well. I also thought, oh, maybe I should go on another round of Accutane, but then I realized, you know, that was a lot to put my body through and who knows, maybe even my mental health through, and I didn't really want to risk that, especially because it didn't work the first time. So was it really worth putting my body and my health through it again? Like, was it really worth that? In my gut, I just knew it wasn't the right decision for me at the time. I was also thinking, I was a student, I was in my 4th year, a super stressful period of time. And I was thinking like, oh, maybe when I graduate and when I'm not in school anymore, maybe my skin will clear up because I'm not under the same stress. But surprise, it didn't go anywhere. As time went on, it just gradually, again, just started getting worse. I started noticing once I moved out to Calgary, just kind of had more time to pay attention to myself and to what's going on and to certain symptoms. I started noticing a lot of other symptoms. Like right before my period, I'd go through this like really intense, like I felt depressed before my period. It wasn't just, you know, agitated and like a little sad and crying for no reason. I just felt really depressed and I wanted to isolate myself again. And that was just kind of like a common pattern, specifically right before my period or like in the beginning of it as well. I knew something was going on and I started doing my research on my IUD and realizing that there are quite a bit of side effects that could be related to actually having the IUD. And also when I moved here in the summer, there were 2 months where I got my period, or I guess my period because it wasn't a full period, twice in 1 month. And that happened in 2 different months. So I was like, something's going on and I don't think that this IUD is going to help anything in terms of figuring out what is actually going on in my body and what my body really needs. So I decided to get the IUD taken out in September of 2022. So that was about 4 months ago. Obviously, I was expecting probably my skin to get worse, maybe other things to get worse too, because my body had just been on birth control since it basically started its reproductive years, given that I was about 14 years old when I started oral birth control, and I've only ever had about 6 months off of birth control before I went right back onto an IUD. I just knew that it wasn't gonna be an easy few months after I got off, but I was just hoping that I'd get off of it and I'd go through the worst, and then hopefully my body would kind of figure out how to regulate itself. Of course, I started breaking out worse than I was before, mostly on my cheeks, and then it kind of went into my jawline too, which I didn't have for a while since the first breakout. So I got like really bad cysts all over my jawline, all over my cheeks. The odd one on my back, I'd say my back knee and the acne on my chest has definitely went down significantly. So I don't know if, you know, maybe the IUD kind of influenced that. Oh, sorry, my memory card was full. Where was I? I was really frustrated. Like, I know I expected it to happen, but it still doesn't make it easy. So I started trying things, a more natural approach. I did some reading, I did my own research. I tried to kind of play around with eating certain foods, like adding more vegetables, adding, you know, specifically things like raw carrots. I tried to cut out gluten and dairy for a little bit. I'm not a restrictive eater, but I was just testing it out to see if it did help. Like maybe I did have those food triggers and maybe, you know, birth control kind of masks it a little bit. I don't know. I was doing it all. I was trying it all. I was also trying to incorporate more wellness into my life just to kind of like help my stress levels. Like maybe it's stress that is really affecting my skin. I invested in expensive medical grade skincare. I'm assuming these things did help to a certain extent, but it wasn't like one of them was the reason. I also almost went and spent like $4,500 on some new acne laser treatment that's supposed to have really good results, and it doesn't matter if it's hormonal or it's supposed to shut off sebum receptors, and so like you can't actually, like even if you have a hormonal imbalance, like the actual receptors to produce the acne are shut off. It's also not addressing like the root cause of things, even though I would love to go and have clear skin. There's clearly something else going on, and acne is not my only symptom. Just kind of sounds like a bit of a band-aid solution. So at this point, I knew that I needed to seek help from a medical professional. The first thing I did was, I don't have a family doctor here, so I went to just a walk-in clinic, kind of spoke to just like a general practitioner doctor, general doctor, I don't know what they call them, but the doctor at the walk-in clinic. I've just asked him if I could get a prescription for a retinol. I also asked if I could get a blood test to see my hormones because I've been dealing with a lot of symptoms right before my period, so I was kind of trying to explain that to him. And his reaction was, he basically told me that what I'm experiencing is completely normal and all women experience different symptoms, but it's all normal when you're in your reproductive years and before your period. Also told me that there was basically nothing that I could do to understand and to treat these symptoms because they were basically a part of life of being a woman. I remember feeling so small in that room. Even when I was talking to him, like, I could tell that I wanted to cry. I didn't cry, but I was so close to crying because I just felt so angry and so unheard. I remember he even said, I'm not technically educated in basically what I was talking about. He decided to say that near the end after basically telling me that everything I experience is completely normal, but he's not educated to say that to me. So it was frustrating and not great, but I left with a requisition to get some blood work done, and I also left with a prescription for a retinol. A good thing that he realized was, hey, I don't know too much about specifically acne, so he referred me to a dermatologist, and that dermatologist called me within 2 weeks, which was pretty awesome. I have never gotten to see a dermatologist because I've always been on a wait list, and then I moved in Toronto. It's honestly almost impossible to see a dermatologist, but I was on a wait list for probably like almost a year, and then they called me once I already moved over here. So obviously I couldn't see that dermatologist, but these guys called me within 2 weeks, and I set up an appointment. I filled in an intake form, all of my issues, I put everything on there. I go to the appointment. The appointment was probably about 10 minutes with the dermatologist, and she immediately ruled out any hormonal influence because I didn't have any facial hair growing, and I thought that was really weird. I insisted that we still do the blood work. It is always right before my period that I get these horrible cystic pimples. She agreed to do blood work with me, and then another thing that threw me off was, so I had told her that I started a retinol and that it had been working pretty well. Like, I still, obviously my skin didn't look great, but compared to it before, like, I had noticed a lot of texture improvements. So the retinol was doing its job, but she still prescribed me a completely different retinol that was like $250. The one that I was currently using was $20. She just insisted that this retinol was the best retinol, and she really had she just talked about what it did, and from my understanding, my retinol did the exact same thing, so I didn't really know why and understand why I should go and spend all this money on this other prescription when mine's working. I walked out of there again disappointed and with really no answers. After the appointment, they have a pharmacy right beside them. So I went to the pharmacy not even thinking like, this is a bad idea. I went there and I was like, you know what? This dermatologist said this was the best retinol. Let's give it a shot. Hopefully it solves all my problems. And that was the attitude that I had, and I had that a lot, especially when I went on all the oral medications as well. I talked to the girl, she takes my prescription, and I don't pay for it yet, but she's kind of getting it ready for me. I go and I sit in the waiting room, and I'm just thinking in my head, like, what am I doing? Like, what I'm using right now is working for me. Why would I spend that much money on a new retinol? Like, I've only been on this other retinol for like maybe like a month, and I'm already seeing improvements. I immediately walk up to the pharmacist again, and I was just like, actually, would I be able to just cancel that prescription? And she was just like really like thrown off. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do a bit more research before I invest in that retinol. And then she's just like, yeah, of course. It felt so good. Like, even though that appointment did not go as planned, I just felt like I was in any doctor's office. And I'm not saying all derms and all doctors are like this either. These are literally just my experiences. The next few weeks, I just kind of was doing my own research on things, and I never ended up actually getting the blood work from either of them because I thought to myself, even if I did get it, like, would it really be the test that I needed, and would they be able to kind of explain it to me like I needed it to be explained? I decided that the best move for me next would be to actually invest in my health and invest in someone that is taught to find the root cause of things and to help people like me in my scenarios. I did find someone, she's a naturopath and she specialized in women's health. It also said specifically like she had been through hormonal imbalance, acne, and that's how she wants to help people. Naturopaths do it all, but that's something that she had like a true passion for. And I was like, honestly, why not put my information here, get a call back, and just feel it out. So that's what I did. And then about 2 days later, I get a call from an admin worker at the clinic, and she was just asking me questions. She wanted to make sure that this doctor would be a good fit for me and be able to help me with what I needed. And of course, I would be a great fit because I had been going through a lot of the things that, you know, she has that passion for. So yeah, the next week, which was yesterday, I had my first appointment with her, and it was 90 minutes of talking about absolutely everything. Sharing my story, telling her about my symptoms, telling her about, you know, family history, my own history, everything. I realized that for what I need, unfortunately, the free healthcare in Canada can't really help me with my specific issues right now. It's just not designed to help me. The biggest green flag when I was at the naturopath's office was that when I left, I didn't have any prescription for any supplements. It makes sense. I'm gonna have to go through testing to actually see what's going on before we actually implement like big changes. All I left with was literally this diagram of her explaining my cycle to me and the different hormones and what they should be doing. And then also another thing was the main possible causes of my acne. She was never like, I think it's this. It's just, it could be this, but we won't know until we get the tests. The first possible outcome was I have estrogen dominance, which could make sense with a lot of my PMS symptoms right before my cycle. That's when progesterone is supposed to be the highest. She explained to me that it could be because I have so much excess estrogen in my body, or it could be that I just don't produce enough progesterone. I could have high androgens. Specifically, we talked about testosterone and how when you have high testosterone, it could really be a result of things like acne. When we talked about my emotional health, it was like a lot of what I dealt with is a lot of anger, like irritability, and like very like kind of like snappy outbursts is what I experienced before my period, or like at the beginning of my period. One of the other possible causes, or you know, so many of these things could be happening at the same time, but another thing was blood sugar regulation. If we do have an issue with blood sugar regulation and insulin, it could also drive up testosterone as well. Another hormone that we're looking at is cortisol, and you know, cortisol can manifest into so many different issues in our body, including our reproductive system. So it's very possible that those levels are also too high, or they could be the main driver. She talked about hormones, she talked about blood sugar regulation, and then of course, you guys can probably guess what's next is gut health issues, which I have had issues with digestion and with my gut. I would say like within the past like year and a half, maybe 2 years, I've started to have issues with that, but before I never did. So there is definitely some testing that I can do there. When she went through the pricing for the hormone testing, so the Dutch test is about $900. Blood sugar regulation test, so it's just like an insulin test, is about $100. The test for my gut health, which would basically be like taking my stool and putting it in labs and testing for certain like bacteria and stuff like that, is about $1,200. Her and I figured that the best solution would be to start with the Dutch test, and then if we do see those high levels of testosterone, then the blood sugar regulation test, the insulin test, would be a good thing to do because that could be driving up testosterone. The test to evaluate my gut health, you know, maybe that's later on. Not all of this needs to be done all at the same time. I truly do think these things are gonna help me and give me some clarity on what's going on. She did give me just like some simple things that I can be doing every day that would only benefit me and not harm any imbalance that might be happening. So just simple lifestyle and nutrition recommendations. So the first one that she said was 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds to help get rid of any like excess estrogen that might be floating around and causing any imbalance, or even just to support like healthy hormones. Another thing was to drink a glass of lemon water when I wake up. Kind of in the same boat was get some castor oil and put it kind of like on the stomach but where my liver is, and put a heating pack and do that a couple times a week when I go to bed. Both of those things are they're supposed to help with bloating and they're supposed to help with liver detoxification as well. So the last thing she suggested was light exposure, specifically in the morning. So what I normally do, or what I want to be doing every single day, is when I wake up, get my lemon water, and then I'm gonna go for either a walk, or I can even sit like on my patio, and to just get like some sunlight in the morning. Also a midday sun exposure as well. She says that's really good for cortisol and like its natural pattern throughout the day. Very like simple and easy things to just implement while we're waiting to get those other results and take the next steps. When I got home from this appointment, I was so relieved. Had a little bit of a cry, and it wasn't like bawling my eyes out, but it was just a really happy emotional moment for me because I finally felt heard. I finally felt like someone was on my side and understood what I was saying, and I felt like I didn't feel like the small person in the office. I felt like I was almost a part of a team to like really figure out what's going on. I'm so grateful for myself for making the decision to do that, and I'm also grateful for people like my naturopath that are actually like really trying to help people. This series is really important to me because I feel like by sharing step by step what I've went through before versus the steps I'm taking now, I think that it can really be beneficial for people to see maybe it's time to look elsewhere. The reminder that you needed to take that step towards better understanding your body. And as women, we're really not explained any of this in school. Like, we really have to dig and do our research or go to a professional and spend quite a bit of money to fully understand even what our cycles like, or understand how our bodies work. We really got to have each other's backs. There's a lot of us that are dealing with this. If you're not already subscribing to my channel, subscribe to my channel to follow along this journey with me. I will be again documenting it all, and I am so excited to do so because I think that it is really empowering and it is something that I'm going to be really proud of. Let's figure out these hormones together. I will see you guys next time, and thank you so much for sticking around.